In the 2024 Chicago Marathon, we saw one of the greatest feats of distance running to date, when Ruth Chepngetich became the first woman ever to run a sub-2:10 marathon. Chepngetich beat the world record by almost 2 minutes, and her own personal best by well over 4 minutes. This is being called the equivalent of a sub-2 hour marathon for women's running, and potentially by a huge amount, with this study claiming that Paula Radcliffe's world record of 2 hours, 15 minutes and 34 seconds was already a sub-2 hour equivalent. But there's a big problem. As has been commonplace with any sudden drop in times across athletics, many people are accusing Chepngetich of doping. Her social media is of course filled with accusations of steroid use, and Letsrun journalist Robert Johnson heavily insinuated doping immediately in the post-race press conference, when he asked,
"Some people may think that the time is too fast and that you must be doping. What would you say to them?"
This is something that was picked up in Kenyan Parliament, who denounced the issue and demanded a formal apology from the journalist. Chepngetich has never failed a doping test, but at face value this does seem to be a pretty suspicious result. It's a huge improvement off an already very fast world record from an athlete whose representative country of Kenya has had widespread issues with doping in recent years. But whilst I understand the suspicion, I do think there is more nuance to this topic than people are making out. In this video, I will be covering the arguments for and against the possibility that Chepngetich is doping. I will then give my own final verdict as to if I think this was a steroid-free performance, first starting off by looking at the prevailing argument that she is abusing steroids. For starters, the result itself is of course unbelievably fast and broke the previous world record by a huge margin. But it should be pointed out that big jumps in the women's marathon have been common of late. Tigz Assefa's previous world record of 2 hours, 11 minutes and 53 seconds, set just 13 months before Chepngetich time, had already surpassed Brigid Kosgei's prior time by more than 2 minutes. It seems pretty clear that the complaints are not just due to the raw speed of the time, as this is nothing new. The big thing for me and many others is the rate of progression in Chepngetich own career. Chepngetich is an experienced marathon runner, having won the Dubai Marathon, the 2019 Marathon World Champs in Doha, and before this record was also a 2-time winner of the Chicago Marathon. At 30 years of age, she is well into her career and would have formed a consistent pattern of times that show where her ability and potential as an athlete lies. She is not an emerging talent with unknown athletic potential where we might anticipate a dramatic increase in speed as she continues to improve. Before the world record, her progression was looking reasonable and steady, with a strong personal best of 2 hours, 40 minutes, 18 seconds, that she achieved in 2022 in none other than the Chicago Marathon. At its time, this was the second fastest women's marathon ever, just 14 seconds behind Brigid Kosgei's world record. However, her new record stands out like a sore thumb. That kind of improvement this deep into a marathon career does not just happen without a significant change to training and racing strategy. What's worse, if you look at Chepngetich splits, you can see she ran a positive race, where the first half of the race is faster than the second half. Essentially, she bombed it from the beginning with a 15-minute first 5k split, and began to slowly drop off the pace as the race continued. Her half-marathon split was a blistering 1 hour, 4 minutes and 16 seconds, or 2:08 marathon pace. She was only 14 seconds off breaking her own half-marathon personal best. Whilst there is some debate on this, the general consensus is that this is not the most efficient way to run a marathon. Whilst positive splits have seen success in distances like the 800 meters, negative splits, a faster second half of the race, or an even split, seem to be the most efficient ways for the marathon. Of course, her being from Kenya has also prompted extra suspicion, given that the country has had a slew of doping controversies in recent years. What's worse is that her agent was also the agent of other high-profile athletes caught for doping, including triple world champ and third fastest 1500 meter runner of all time, Asbel Kiprop, and 2016 Olympic women's marathon champion Jemima Songong. Whilst we of course can't claim an athlete as doping purely due to the agent or the country they represent, these things do not help Chepngetich case. So to summarise the argument, the time itself is incredible, the time violates the expectation for her progression, and she comes from a nation with a reputation for widespread doping. Now at first I thought this was an open and shut case of doping, but after some research I think there is more nuance to the topic that needs to be given. The best argument that Chepngetich is not doping in my mind can be corroborated from these 3 articles, which I'm leaving in the description. Whilst they do not directly argue for her innocence, they do provide insight as to how Chepngetich could have run this time cleanly, if indeed she did. There are 3 main arguments I'd like to cover. 1. Chepngetich could be a super responder to emerging running technologies, such as certain super shoes. 2. Super shoes in general disproportionately benefit female runners, justifying the greater fall in times. 3. Better drafting behind paces compared to her previous personal best could have saved her large amounts of energy. First of all, what do we mean when we say super responder? A super responder is someone who reacts particularly strongly to a certain change in training or racing stimulus. For example, while super shoes have been shown to improve pretty much all runners' times, the amount each individual shoe affects each athlete varies. Whilst a prototype of the Nike Vaporflies were found to have an average of 4% improvement in performance compared to other contemporary racing shoes, the effectiveness differed by each athlete, ranging from 2% to 6%. The athletes on the 6% end or higher could be classed as super responders, as they have seen 3 times the improvement compared to some other athletes using the shoe. There's also anecdotal evidence of runners preferring newer or older versions of a running shoe that may match their running style better. It seems logical to think that this would have a boost in performance across a 2-hour marathon time if you were using shoes that seem to agree with you more. For instance, Olympic silver medalist and New York Marathon winner Abdi Nagai has commented that he prefers the Nike Alphafly 3 over the previous 2 versions, which did not agree with his running style as much. Chepngetich herself has recently transitioned from running in the Nike Vaporfly 3s to the Alphaflies 3s, and has said she has felt a noticeable improvement. While she did run in the Alphaflies in London to a disappointing time, it could be that Chepngetich is a low responder in the Vaporflies and was thus reaping far less of the potential benefits of super shoes. If you pair that with the possibility that she is a high responder to the Alphaflies, it could help explain the drastic drop in her times. Another non-shoe related tech improvement is the Morton carbohydrate drink that Chepngetich was using for the first time. This drink uses what Morton calls hydrogel technology, which they claim allows for a quicker rate of digestion of glucose, and reduces potential GI issues caused by ingesting high amounts of carbohydrates during exercise. The evidence of whether this actually works is mixed, but a recent study found a 2.1% increase in a time trial performance by experienced runners, who took Morton's hydrogel compared to a non-hydrogel carbohydrate drink. This could be another factor in marathon running that Chepngetich is a super responder to, and therefore disproportionately benefits from. I should point out though that more evidence is required to confidently assert that hydrogel technology actually works. Previous studies tested with non-runners have suggested otherwise. Another theory that has arisen is that super shoes disproportionately benefit female runners compared to male runners. Since 2015, which is mostly in line with the introduction of super shoes in 2016, the men's marathon world record has decreased by 1.9%, whereas the women's world record has been brought down by 4% now in light of Chepngetich new time. This has been consistent with overall road records, as the men's records have fallen by an average of 1.5%, whilst the women's records have fallen by 3.7%. A potential reason for this is that super shoes allow runners to retain as much energy as possible through their stride, with the new PEBA-based foams losing much less force through the ground than the old EVA foams. Because women are on average shorter than men and therefore have a shorter stride length, they are striking the ground far more often than men, and reap the benefits of the improved energy return from super shoes more. Another reason is that despite the fact that men are on average taller than women, the height limit on shoes foam stack height of 40mm that is imposed by World Athletics is equal across both genders, meaning women are benefiting from a greater foam to human ratio, if that makes any sense. This might make it easier to justify why the women's marathon especially has experienced a slew of large world records. It could also exacerbate the super responder effect, as the average female athlete might respond better to different super shoes. The final large factor suggested in these articles is that an improved drafting strategy could have played a role. In her previous personal best performance of 2 hours 14 minutes, Chepngetich used only one pacer and would regularly fall behind him or drift out next to him. In contrast, her recent world record saw her draft consistently behind 2 pacers, which may have granted her significant energy savings during the race compared to her previous personal best. There have been more studies on drafting done in light of the Nike Breaking 2 project and the Ineos 159 challenge. The Ineos 159 challenge in particular used a 7-man diamond formation which was formed around Kipchoge, and this allowed him to draft behind it efficiently. It was estimated that this helped him save up to 5.5 minutes of time across the marathon. Some more evidence is this case study of a female athlete which analysed the different levels of drag reduction based on varying formations. They found that being on the side of the pacer, as Chepngetich in a 2022 performance was, can increase wind resistance, as the athlete is caught in the slipstream of the pacer. They additionally found that Chepngetich's new pacing strategy of running in between 2 paces could decrease drag by up to 40%. Of course, this was just a single runner, so it should be taken with a grain of salt. Although Chepngetich only had 2 paces, she could still have gained a notable benefit, and this could also be another example of the hyper-responder idea. It could be that Chepngetich especially benefits from effective drafting, lowering her time even further. A few small arguments that can be made as well is that she was familiar with the course, having won and attempted world records in Chicago before. Her previous record attempts, including her personal best, were similarly run very aggressively, with a super fast start followed by a pretty bad drop in pace in the second half. This tells us 2 things. Chepngetich could have improved her previous personal best if she had a more even pacing strategy, and it also shows us that she believed she was capable of super fast times before 2024. As a reminder, she's also never failed a drug test before, though of course most athletes have never failed a drug test until they do. So with all this in mind, what are my thoughts? Can these factors explain Chepngetich world record? Unfortunately, I have to go with the prevailing view and say that I think Chepngetich is probably doping. It's a massive shame given how historic the time is for marathon running and women's marathon running in particular, but I cannot see a world where an athlete that deep into a career makes such a colossal improvement. Although the factors I mentioned help make the time much more believable, they all have their individual flaws, and the only factor I can think of that completely explains this level of improvement is taking steroids. The research we have on drafting strategies, the varying benefits of super shoes on different genders, and the idea of super responders as a whole idea is very limited right now. There's just not much research that's been done on these topics, especially on elite runners. We also have no direct evidence that Chepngetich is actually a super responder. It's just a potential explanation we're forced into suggesting because of her rapid times. And whilst I don't like using an athlete's nation to incriminate the athlete themselves, the fact that Kenya have suffered so many doping allegations does not help her case. I'd say that I'm less convinced she's on steroids than the average person, because it seems that most running fans are pretty clear that they believe strongly she's on steroids. And these factors have put some doubt in my mind. Regardless of whether she took steroids, her performance was unbelievable, and these factors would have helped a decent amount in making that time even more impressive. But at the end of the day, if she fails a drug test, I would not be surprised. Whereas if we somehow procured irrefutable evidence that she was clean, which of course isn't possible, that would relieve me but also surprise me quite a lot. But I think it's sad how the suspicion around her just speaks to the state of our sport today. We can't get a super fast time without people rightly questioning the integrity of it. We need some serious change in athletics. If you want to find out exactly how and why elite athletes take steroids, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.